Dr. Balthazar here, watching some old movies to shore up my as-prescribed playlist that expands on why I recommended something in one of my previous videos. In a Loki Season 2 review, I prescribed the movie Shutter Island. Today we'll get into why. I don't go in for promotional work building up interest in the film while holding off a major plot twist or a surprise ending. I analyze the story in full as a mental exercise I enjoy. So, spoiler alert, I spoiled the movie. If you haven't seen Shutter Island, check it out and then come back my way. I ain't going anywhere unless I get copyright claimed out of existence, and hopefully that hammer isn't about to drop on me just yet. Shutter Island is part of the psychological thriller genre, but I classify it as a mystery movie. Terrible storytellers fuck up mysteries in all mediums by doing everything they can to mislead readers, listeners, viewers, or whatever, and then coming up with some kind of swerve at the end to manufacture an "I never saw that coming" response. Of course you didn't. Nobody could have solved the mystery as presented, since no logical deduction based on observation was ever made possible. A decent mystery gives you all the information you need to solve it, and you do. While a great mystery presents you with all the information you need to arrive at the correct understanding of characters and events, but gently steers you into making the wrong conclusions about them. So maybe you solved the mystery the first time around, but probably you didn't. Shutter Island is a great mystery movie. I found myself a bit more straight-laced with this video than my usual irreverent self, since the subject matter treats of trauma and mental health, and those just don't feel like topics to make too light of. If you're sticking around, thanks for the view. Like and subscribe. Love your face. Never forget our time together. So I usually spend some time in the context of a film's release, but it doesn't really come into play with Shutter Island since it came out in 2010, meaning it's modern but not recent. The script is based on the novel Shutter Island by Dennis Lehane, who's also written Mystic River, Gone Baby Gone, Live by Night, and Animal Rescue, which have all been adapted into films. Always nice to see a Massachusetts man having success for those of you who haven't worked out the accent I'm forever suppressing.
Good you are, wicked awesome.
It's directed by Martin Scorsese with an A-list cast on a budget of $80 million and brought home $295 million at the box, so nicely done. The story opens on a ferry delivering a pair of federal marshals to a mental institute on a fictitious island in Boston Harbor. The lead detective, Teddy Daniels, meets his new partner Chuck something or another, and we're told Teddy doesn't do well with water, his wife died in a fire, and a storm is on the way. We're presented with the case they've come to solve. A female prisoner named Rachel Solando has vanished into thin air. We're introduced to one of the head doctors at the facility named Dr. Cowley, who may or may not be our villain. He's bald and has a goatee, so that slants towards yes. The story takes place in 1954, and flashbacks indicate Teddy was part of the Allied forces that liberated the Nazi death camp at Dachau in April of 1945. We're given some cryptic evidence to ponder over, the law of 4 and who is 67, and the investigation continues with the interviews of staff and patients, with the exception of the missing patient's primary psychiatrist, who left the island earlier in the day. A dream sequence adds layers onto the Dachau trauma and the tragedy of Teddy's wife Dolores dying. Told a man named Andrew Ladies set the fire that took her life. The alcohol use disorder by Teddy is also suggested. We're informed of a philosophical clash happening within the field of mental health, with some adherents to traditional practices like lobotomy, others embracing pharmacology, and still others more of a patient-centered approach. The plot thickens as the island may or may not be what it appears to be, and the mystery shifts to finding Dolores' killer and exposing inhumane experiments on the brain that seek to weaponize humans by making them into more effective killing machines.
You do not know pain, you do not know fear. You will taste man flesh!
The answer to the who is 67 question is partially answered. There's 67 patients on the island instead of the 66 that were previously accounted for. Rachel Solando is discovered and back in her cell. Teddy struggles with migraines. If these are signs and symptoms tied to alcohol withdrawal, his mind score is going to be high enough to add the phenobarbital to the benzodiazepine regimen. For those unfamiliar with withdrawal symptoms, alcohol is a depressant. The body's central nervous system tunes itself up to counterbalance against. So if a person with alcohol dependence stops drinking, it's like taking the restrictor plate off a stock car, or in advanced cases, the restrictor plate and the brakes, and the brain goes into seizure is because it's still tuned up too high, and the buffer it was balancing itself against is gone. Although the true suffering is when the liver fails. Most people would like their death to be quick, painless, and dignified. If those things are London, liver failure is Tokyo. But hey, life is tough and those that live it, and alcohol use has been a therapeutic for soldiers as long as both booze and war have existed. So,
do as you will.
Hey, I'm your bullshit fake doctor, not your dad. Another dream sequence gives Andrew Ladies a face and deepens guilt as a principal character trait for the protagonist. A hurricane wreaks havoc on the island, allowing the detectives to get themselves into Ward C, where the most extreme of the behavioral patients are housed. Teddy has a violent encounter with the patient, then comes across a man named George Noyes, who we were told was the whistleblower that revealed the island's nefarious schemes to him back in a prison southwest of Boston. So it doesn't make sense that he's here at this time. Unless the group controlling the island has greater powers of influence than previously believed, or there's something we're not understanding. Their conversation leaves Teddy suspicious about his new partner. They separate for time, and our guy makes his way down a cliff to a cave where we have a fireside chat with another Rachel Solando. This one a doctor who learned about the island's experiments and was committed as a prisoner to protect those secrets. So our question of who the 67th patient is appears to be answered. She suggests Teddy was deliberately brought to the island so they can imprison him as well. Some dialogue also illustrates the extensive powers of rationalization the ultra-paranoid possess.
Reasonable protests or denial, valid fears, paranoia.
Survival instincts are
defense mechanisms.
Teddy then free solos his way back up the cliff face. Pretty impressive stuff given how wet the rocks are, and his return to the front office where Dr. Cowley stuns him with a plot twist after he asks about his partner.
You don't have a partner, Marshall. You came here alone.
Working under the assumption that we're trying to solve a mystery regarding sinister experimentation and a cover-up, that means Chuck has been taken captive and is going to have his melon tapped in him. Teddy struggles with the choice of try to save him or save himself. He heads to the island's lighthouse to save his partner, against the wishes of a hallucination of his wife. But when he arrives at the lighthouse, he doesn't find his partner with his pants down or his head open. Instead, he finds Dr. Cowley just chilling. The real mystery is now revealed, and the rule of 4 and question of who is 67 are explained. Teddy Daniels isn't a U.S. Marshal. He's a patient at the hospital. Everything we've seen has been a role play, allowing him to pursue his paranoid delusions about the false reality he's built up around himself to come to the logical conclusion that his ideas aren't real. There is no arsonist named Andrew Ladies, or anyone named Rachel Solando. Teddy Daniels is Andrew Ladies. His wife had a serious mental health problem, and he drank and ignored it. She murdered their children by drowning them in the lake by their home, and he killed her for it. His neglect led to the tragedy. And his grief fueled his guilt, which his mind dealt with by creating an illusionary world that allowed him to live in denial. His physiological symptoms haven't been due to alcohol withdrawal or poisoning. They've been due to withdrawal from a first-generation antipsychotic called chlorpromazine, which you should always taper off of rather than just stop taking. Those first-generation antipsychotics are no fucking joke. The hospital has been debating what to do with him.
I wish I could let you just live in your fantasy world. I really do. But you're violent, trained, dangerous. You're the most dangerous patient we have.
The roleplay is Dr. Cowley's last-ditch effort to bring him back to reality and avoid the lobotomy option, since the pharmacology approach hasn't yielded results. Teddy, Andrew, whatever, finally accepts reality, but opts for the lobotomy, since he just can't live with the guilt. Roll credits. Leonardo DiCaprio plays the Teddy Daniels, Andrew Ladies character. He's great, but when does he ever put out a bad performance? If he has, it doesn't come readily to mind. Repeating elements is a film technique I think highly of. It allows for comparisons that reveal how much has changed in a viewer's understanding of the characters. For example, take the line, "You're all wet, baby."
Why are you all wet, baby?
At this moment in time, we know who Teddy Daniels is. He's a federal marshal, and the mystery being solved is the missing patient. And then later in the film,
Why are you all wet, baby?
at this moment in time, we know who Teddy Daniels is. He's a federal marshal, and the mystery being solved is a cover-up of human rights abuses. And then the final time,
Baby? Why are you all wet?
at this moment in time, we know who Teddy Daniels is. He's a mental patient, and the mystery being solved is how he came to be so and doesn't know it. The character transforms, both figuratively and literally. His outfit begins with clothing a detective would wear, then circumstances put him in the orderly scrubs, and at the end, he's in the patient scrubs. There's a visual decline that parallels the mental decline as the true character is uncovered from the layers of false reality he's built up around himself. Mark Ruffalo plays the Chuck All Lester Sheehan character. He also transforms from an enthusiastic young detective to the main character's psychiatrist. His transformation doesn't move in stages, because it's a reveal that adds to the shock of the truth coming out in the lighthouse, which makes logical sense to present it that way. The character works, since we believe he has the best interest of the protagonist at heart, as both the marshal and the doctor. Ben Kingsley plays Dr. Cowley. He does a great job with contradictory show and tell, in that he's telling you he's a caring doctor with a patient-centered philosophy,
I have this radical idea that if you treat a patient with respect, listen to him, try and understand, you just might reach him.
but he's showing you a stern and menacing presence, so we can accept that he's maybe a villain at the head of a Nazi-esque scheme, until the story concludes and we recognize his altruistic intentions, and how we were encouraged to misunderstand him. For example, the scene,
Everyone wants a quick fix. They always have. I'm trying to do something that people, yourself included, don't understand, and I'm not going to give up without a fight.
may seem like he's not going to let his mad scientist experiments be taken away from him, but it actually means he isn't going to let a patient of his be lobotomized until he's exhausted every resource to provide care along the lines of his empathy-based philosophy, rather than the approach of the pharmacologists and lobotomizers he clashes with in his field. Michelle Williams plays the female lead as Teddy, Andrew's wife. She also goes through a transformative journey as she begins as an innocent, helpless victim, and by film's end, she's understood to be an unhinged, suicidal manic depressive who torched her apartment as a cry for help and murdered her children when that help never arrived. Williams makes it work, and while she doesn't quite get the New England accent in this film, she figures it out 6 years later when she appears in Manchester by the Sea.
I'm not fucking around! It's 2 o'clock in the fucking morning. Get these fucking assholes dressed and get the fuck out of here!
There's a host of other supporting characters who don't transform from one thing into another, although it's not effective that everybody does, and they all do great jobs playing their parts. Whether you like the film or not, you have to concede it's well cast and well acted.
You have to let me go.
I can't.
You gotta let it go.
I can't.
You have to let it go!
I can't! I can't!
For world building, we have a couple worlds being built up. The first is the historical context of 1954. World War II ended in 1945, so we have veterans carrying around that experience in a very immediate way. Also, the paranoia of the Cold War is in full swing, with the hydrogen bomb's successful detonation in 1950, the Korean War from 1950 to 53, and McCarthyism only beginning to lose steam in 54 by overreaching and attacking the U.S. Army. For those unfamiliar with McCarthyism, it's basically if cancel culture was able to do real harm to people's lives and reputations with their chicken shit labeling and obvious attempts to censor ideas and push personal agendas, fuck those people, then and now. The film uses the trauma of World War II as a background cause for Teddy Andrews' mental health instability, and there's plenty of references to Cold War events to capture the paranoia of the time period.
We hear things here about the outside world, about atolls, about H-bomb tests.
As always, Scorsese does a great job with the costumes. His reputation following gangs in New York, that regardless of how full of shit his understanding of history is, he'll get the buttons on the shirts right, is well deserved. The film also builds up a world in which we're shown the truth, but instead of interpreting it correctly, we understand it through the lens of Teddy Andrews' delusional paranoia. Take the patient interviews, for example. After they're concluded, Teddy notes that
she was coached. She used practically the same words as Carly and the nurse, like she'd been told exactly what to say.
Which is correct. She's been coached to take part in the role play on his behalf, but we assume she's been coached as a part of the cover-up to the grotesque experiments on the human brain. Another example comes to the dialogue between Teddy and George Noyes, which Carly runs back to walk us through the conclusions we could have made if we were listening objectively instead of going along with Teddy's perspective.
Who did this to you, George?
You did. You did this.
No, he meant that it was my
You
fault.
almost killed him.
Years ago, I read something that argued the elements of fire and water equated to fantasy and reality. So when you have fire, you have Teddy's imagination, and when you have water, it's treating with reality. But I don't think that quite works. A more accurate statement would be scenes with the fire motif have a greater probability of being saturated in Teddy's hallucinations than scenes without. But it's something to watch for and draw your own conclusions on, I suppose. For themes, we have a lot going on. First off, the impact of trauma, combat experience in particular, but also violence in general.
Did you know that the word trauma comes from the Greek for wound? Wounds can create monsters, and you are wounded, Marshall.
Secondly, the grief and guilt that follows surviving or causing trauma, the universal struggle to let go of someone we've loved and lost, and how deeply that can harm us.
And here, the little girl, the one you dream of every night, your daughter. Her name was Rachel. Are you going to deny that she ever lived?
As well as unhealthy ways of avoiding trauma, grief, and guilt, and a seductive allure of denial instead of accepting personal responsibility, which if paired with serious mental health issues can lead to a downward spiral of delusional thinking. We also have some thematic consideration on the appropriate care for those suffering from trauma and tragedy. We have the old line of thinking, in which people with mental health issues are more or less defective, so fuck them. No moral hang-ups of drilling some holes in some heads so they won't fuck about, which was clashing with the view that emerged in the later 20th century that the right drug could be the simple miracle cure. So let's play chemistry and ignore any other consideration until one hits. As well as the view that's made considerable progress in the last 2 decades that mental health is a complex issue that needs highly personalized and multifaceted long-term approaches to have a fighting chance of being impactful. And regardless of progress or lack thereof, empathy isn't so unreasonable an ask for those that are suffering. In conclusion, a bad mystery movie lies to its viewers, a good mystery movie tells the truth, and a great mystery movie tells the truth but encourages viewers to lie to themselves. Shutter Island is a great mystery movie. Even if you don't take an interest in the themes at play, the actors are supremely talented, and Martin Scorsese is who he is when it comes to storytelling. Anyway, that's my thought for the day. I'm Dr. Balthazar. Like what you like, don't what you don't. It's all your call, Kemosabe. Take it easy, everyone.